Welcome to Scenario the In-Depth Podcast and Reviews. Today we're taking a deep dive into the history of a fashion house that, well, it's just continually reinvented itself. Balenciaga. We've gathered some really detailed explorations of the brand's journey, from its very beginnings right up to where it is now, its current status.
Right.
Our mission, basically, to unpack the key moments, the creative forces, and those unexpected twists that have really shaped Balenciaga into the huge name it is today.
Sure.
We want to give you a concise but, thorough understanding of its fascinating evolution.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, right from the get-go, is Cristobal Balenciaga's origins, born in the small Spanish fishing village, 1895.
Wow.
And growing up with a seamstress mother, his early life was just completely immersed in fabric, sewing. You have to imagine that had a profound effect.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that a bit. So you're a kid, you're surrounded by the tools of the trade, literally.
Yeah.
That hands-on experience, so young, it must have been, absolutely foundational. And then you get this almost Cinderella moment, right? With the Marquesa de Casatorres.
Exactly, like the ultimate fashion mentorship kicking off.
Yeah.
And her recognition of his talent, it wasn't just like a passing comment. She actively supported his apprenticeship.
Right.
And this connection to the Spanish aristocracy, it was more than just patronage. It put him right in a world of clients who really valued exceptional craftsmanship.
Okay.
So by the age of just 24, he already had his own couture boutique. That kind of early success really underlines his incredible talent.
So, still incredibly young. He's not just, sketching somewhere. He's actually making bespoke, one-of-a-kind pieces for the Spanish elite.
Yeah.
Talk about pressure. A high-stakes debut.
Definitely. And these weren't everyday clothes. They were significant investments, for big social events. And what really set his early stuff apart was this innovative blend he had, sort of Japanese and European fashion sensibilities. It wasn't just picking bits. It was a real fusion. It resulted in something totally new and incredibly sought after. He wasn't just following trends. He was sort of defining a new aesthetic.
But, every good story has its twists and turns. And here's where it gets really interesting. The end of the Spanish monarchy, 1931.
Yeah.
Suddenly, bam, bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It's such a stark reminder of how closely high fashion can be tied to, social and political changes.
Precisely. That noble clientele disappearing, it had a direct, huge impact on his business.
Sure.
But his ability to bounce back is quite remarkable. Within just a few years, he didn't just recover, he expanded. Opened those Isa boutiques in Madrid and Barcelona.
Isa, named after his mother, right?
Yeah.
A lovely detail, a clear tribute.
Yeah, a touching tribute to her influence. But then another massive upheaval, the Spanish Civil War in 36.
Oh, no.
Yeah, once again, forced to close everything. It's almost hard to imagine that level of, repeated disruption.
I know.
This second big setback seems to have been the catalyst, though, for a really transformative decision. His choice to move to Paris in 1937.
Okay. Yeah.
That was a pivotal moment. A bold move right to the heart of haute couture.
Imagine starting over again, but in Paris. That must have been incredibly daunting. He even simplified his brand name, just Balenciaga. And then August 37, his first Paris collection debuts. It was well received, but it was the collection a couple of years later that really got people talking internationally, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The 1939 collection, that was his real breakthrough in Paris. It drew inspiration from 17th century Spanish fashion and, quite movingly, the ongoing Spanish Civil War. That cultural depth, plus, getting featured in Vogue, and that amazing illustration by Carl Erickson that really pushed it onto the global stage.
So he escapes one war, only to basically arrive right on the cusp of another one, World War II.
Yeah.
Yet, remarkably, Balenciaga didn't just survive. He actually thrived during the war. His square coat, for instance, became this super coveted item. People apparently went to great lengths, even risky travel, to get one. What was so special about that coat?
Well, it really speaks to the power of his design, I think, and the status it gave people. Even in a time of, austerity and hardship, his creations were seen as somehow essential.
Yeah.
And then after the war, Balenciaga was actually in a relatively strong position compared to other French couture houses. They were struggling with material shortages, trade issues.
Right.
And then came that really innovative Théâtre de la Mode exhibit.
Yes. The miniature mannequins showing off the designs. What an incredibly clever way to sort of revitalize French fashion during those tough post-war years.
Right, exactly.
Presenting high fashion on a smaller scale. It's just genius. And it really helped broaden public awareness, didn't it? And appreciation for couture.
It really did. Made couture feel a bit more accessible, generated fresh interest. And then, in the 1950s, Balenciaga just solidified his reputation for these groundbreaking silhouettes. Take the tunic dress in 1955.
Which, yeah, our sources point out was a real departure from the more fitted, ornate styles that were popular then.
Completely.
A bold statement, new direction. And then just a couple of years later, 57, the sack dress. I mean, totally revolutionary in its shape.
Absolutely. It just completely challenged that long-held focus on a defined waistline. These designs, plus the famous baby doll dress, which felt so youthful,
Yeah.
they really established him as a designer who wasn't afraid to break the mold. And the ultimate proof really came from inside the industry itself, right?
It certainly did. Christian Dior himself, I mean, a giant in fashion called Balenciaga, the master of us all.
Wow.
That's pretty much the highest praise you can get.
Right.
Really acknowledging Balenciaga's place,
Yeah.
right at the very top of haute couture.
Yeah.
So he's at this peak of influence. What happens next that just shocks everyone?
Well, in 1968, after nearly 30 years running the show, Cristóbal Balenciaga just unexpectedly announces his retirement.
Just like that.
Yeah, and the closure of the House of Balenciaga. It sent, absolute shockwaves through the fashion world.
And he didn't even pass the torch, did he? To any of his amazing apprentices like Oscar de la Renta or Huberto Givenchy. Why do that?
Well, our sources really point to his intense desire for privacy, his discomfort with the public spotlight.
Oh.
For him, it seems like the work itself was the thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He rarely gave interviews, famously didn't even go to his own shows near the end. His focus was just purely on the creation.
Okay.
He even apparently suggested his loyal clients should go to Givenchy, which says a lot about his lack of personal ego, maybe, and his commitment to design itself.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Then his passing in 1972. The king is dead, declared Women's Wear Daily. You can really feel the sense of loss there.
Absolutely.
And Coco Chanel describing him as the only true couturier left.
Wow. It really underlines that feeling that a whole era in fashion had just ended. It truly felt like it. But, as often happens, the story doesn't quite end there. The rights to the Balenciaga name, the legacy, they were transferred in a pretty convoluted way after he died.
Oh.
Eventually acquired by a German chemical manufacturer called Hoax.
Wait, a chemical manufacturer? That seems so random, out of left field.
It does, doesn't it? But our sources clarified this was mainly for the perfume line that Balenciaga had set up way back, like 1947.
Ah, okay. So the brand name lived on, just not really in fashion for a while.
Exactly. But then in 1986, the rights got sold again, this time to a perfume company, Jacques Bogart, and they actually had ambitions to bring the fashion side back.
Okay, interesting.
So they brought in Michel Goma to create Balenciaga's very first ready-to-wear collection, and this was a monumental shift.
A huge change.
Yeah.
Going from bespoke, high-end couture to, mass-produced, accessible, ready-to-wear. But Goma apparently had a tough time capturing that original Balenciaga feel.
He did, yeah. Reports say he faced real challenges, got criticism for moving too far from that elevated couture spirit. It was a huge task, wasn't it? Reviving such a legendary couture house as a ready-to-wear brand, trying to honor the past but appeal to a new market. His 5 years there were marked by these difficulties.
Right.
Then, in 1992, Josephus Thimister was appointed. And he's credited with kind of modernizing the brand, steering it back towards a more high-end status.
Okay, getting back on track.
Uh-huh.
But his time also ended pretty abruptly, didn't it? After that rather memorable runway show with the super loud live electronic band.
Oh, yeah. Apparently, it was seen as maybe a bit too edgy, too aggressive for the Balenciaga image at the time.
Caused a stir.
It certainly did. And as our sources suggest, it kind of acted as another turning point. So in the search for a new creative director, the company looked inside to a young, relatively unknown talent already working there, Nicolas Ghesquière.
Ah, Ghesquière.
And that turned out to be a truly pivotal decision.
Yeah, I remember he faced some initial skepticism, right? But his first collection, all black, directly inspired by Cristóbal Balenciaga himself, it was an immediate hit. Really struck a chord.
It absolutely did. He somehow managed to respect the house's incredible heritage while injecting this fresh contemporary vision. He successfully reestablished Balenciaga as a major force, in contemporary fashion.
Right.
Which ultimately led to its acquisition by the luxury group Kering in 2001.
And under Ghesquière, we saw some really iconic pieces emerge. Those gladiator boots and, of course, the hugely successful city bag, sometimes called the motorcycle or lariat bag.
Oh, yeah.
That bag has a funny story, doesn't it? Didn't the board reject it at first?
It did, yeah. They apparently thought it wasn't structured enough, maybe not conventional enough for a luxury bag.
Oh.
But the models loved it, people like Kate Moss championed it, and their enthusiasm created such public demand that the board basically had to change their minds.
That's great. A perfect example of organic popularity driving success.
Totally.
So Ghesquière eventually moved on to Louis Vuitton in 2012, and then Alexander Wang stepped in, brought his own darker, more minimalist vibe for, well, a relatively short time.
Wang's tenure, yeah, generated buzz but was shorter. Then 2015, another really significant shift. The appointment of Demna Gvasalia, who came with this strong background in streetwear and his own really influential brand, Vetements.
Yeah, Vetements was huge then.
Yeah.
And Gvasalia's approach was so different, wasn't it? This sort of high-low mix, luxury shapes with very deliberately unrefined streetwear graphics, like those Vetements hoodies with the big metal logos and those often quite provocative slogans.
Exactly. And his use of what some call downstream collaborations, like that really unexpected one with DHL.
Oh, yeah, the DHL shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt like a very intentional commentary on, high-end fashion branding, challenging our ideas of value and status.
And then repurposing the Bernie Sanders campaign logo for Balenciaga's Autumn-Winter 2017 collection. Another example of using familiar symbols to kind of spark conversation, maybe a bit of controversy too.
Precisely. His designs often ignite debate, that's for sure. But they undeniably grab attention and reflect, well, a certain moment in culture. Then, of course, there were the massively popular speed trainers, which really kicked off the whole sock shoe trend.
Everyone had those for a while.
Followed by the deliberately opposite and equally influential Triple S sneaker, which is pretty much credited with starting the whole dad shoe craze.
Yeah, quite a contrast. Now, despite all that success, Gvasalia stepped down from Vetements in 2019, which a lot of people saw as a sign he was maybe going to focus even more on Balenciaga. And then came the really huge news, the return of haute couture.
Yes. July 2021, the first couture collection from the house since Cristobal himself retired way back in 1968.
Just incredible, truly momentous occasion.
And Gvasalia's couture debut, it felt like such a heartfelt homage to Cristobal. You had updated versions of classic Balenciaga shapes, a lot of black, echoing the founder's preference.
And the location too, right?
Exactly. Held in Cristobal's original Paris showroom, just added another layer of significance.
And some notable details from the show. No music, apparently.
Rest silent.
Right. Couture for men, a first for Balenciaga. And a front row full of celebs, like Kanye West.
Yeah, speaking of Kanye, his close relationship with Demna has become really visible, hasn't it?
Very.
From his Donda album events, wearing Balenciaga, to Demna designing merchandise.
It's certainly a major creative partnership.
Yeah.
And then most recently, that collaboration with The Simpsons. Another completely unexpected, totally innovative move. Really shows Balenciaga is still willing to push boundaries and surprise us.
Absolutely.
So the history of Balenciaga, it really is this remarkable story of constant adaptation, incredible resilience, facing huge challenges, and just continually redefining what it means to be a top fashion house.
Yeah.
From its roots as this Spanish couture atelier to a global giant embracing streetwear, and now circling back to its haute couture origins. Quite the journey.
Its ability to navigate, economic hardship, war, and just the constantly shifting cultural tastes. It really highlights the enduring vision of Cristobal Balenciaga and then the creative leaders who came after him, guiding the brand through it all.
And Cristobal Balenciaga's original legacy, that innovation, that impeccable craft, it clearly still inspires and influences fashion today, even decades after he stepped away.
For sure. And Demna Gvasalia's current direction, it certainly points towards a really exciting future for Balenciaga. Skillfully balancing that rich, storied heritage with this bold, often provocative willingness to push creative limits and engage with culture today in ways you just don't expect.
It really makes you think, what parts of Balenciaga's story really stick with you? Is it that, unwavering dedication to the craft, that consistent courage to innovate, or maybe its unique ability to reflect and sometimes even challenge society through fashion? Lots to think about. That's all with it. Thank you for listening to us. Subscribe if you want to listen to other podcasts and hear from us again.